I'm a master's level social worker and have been in the field of geriatrics now in the medical field for about 11 years. And so if you can imagine, as a medical social worker, we see quite a few things. In medicine, social workers aren't always just working with those without funds. And I think that's very important to realize that when you're in the medical field doing social work, anyone that crosses the threshold of your service is who you provide services to. And so often there is sort of an overassumption that we social workers only focus on those that are indigent. But in the medical field, what we find is we are there to provide services for those that are homeless with no income to those with millions in the bank and have no financial concerns. Usually we're also part of an interdisciplinary team with the services that we're providing. So often on our team we'll be working right alongside internally people like physicians and nurses, therapists, other social workers, chaplains, bereavement coordinators, depending on sort of what field that we're in specifically. But then outside of that pool, we're also working with a large subset of community providers. And so we're often sort of the hub for a lot of what's going on. I am now what's called an aging life care manager, which, I'm gonna let you help me there. You're fine. Which is sort of a specialty subset for primarily master's level social workers and registered nurses, where we primarily help clients that are very medically fragile or that have very complex concerns. And so we've worked with a variety of people. I had a very interesting case recently with a referral that was made to me of a lady that had a DUI and I was actually in jail when I got her as my client. What we found is that the seizures that she was plagued with for about the last year before she was given back her keys to then drive and then get in this accident and then to jail, was that she actually had Creutzfeldt-Jakob's, which is basically human mad cow. And so sometimes the cases look very different when we're going in to when we start digging around and trying to put the pieces together. So part of our job as aging life care managers is to walk into very difficult situations, and I like to say start that magic board. So I feel like I'm on CSI and I'm just going and trying to figure out really the basis of what's going on and then help the families map through that. I also feel very blessed because I'm married a techie. My husband is actually a mechanical engineer graduate of Georgia Tech, so he was very excited to know that his UGA wife is coming to speak at Tech this morning. So when I was talking to him about this presentation, I wanted to take it from the field of social work, the field of gerontology, to how this is going to sort of cross over to research design and some other things. So he definitely helped me a lot with a lot more of what you guys do so that I had a greater understanding of how it all interplays. So what I find very, very interesting in this field is that people come to where they are for a variety of reasons. So for those that are in research or design, often it might be something that's close to your heart. So I find that when you ask why are you interested in this particular thing, sometimes there's a family story. So sometimes it's, my grandmother suffered from that, or I had a neighbor's brother's cousin. I mean, the stories get really interesting, but what you find is often there's a personal connection. Sometimes they come to it as a team. So, I'm involved in this and we all had this great idea and so we're gonna work together as a team. I find that a lot of people are interested in a topic because it's just academically thrilling. There's a lot of things, especially coming out now. I went to a presentation not two days ago now on stroke technologies that are coming, and they are unbelievable. Some of the cases that they're able to save now that were literally just a pat on the head 10 years ago. So I find it very interesting how people get to a point where they want to get involved with a certain topic. So one of my very favorite questions when I'm talking to other people in the field is the why. Why do you do this? Because I think that really boils down to a lot of the passions behind their work. So whenever I was talking to Jason, who's my husband, about sort of a standard method of how all this comes to play, he said, okay, so you get an idea from some reason, and then you start with sort of a more methodical process than what I'm used to. So you start with this idea of design, and then you start developing different brainstorming, you look at things very carefully, you start developing prototypes, and then you test it and evaluate it and test it and evaluate it and test it and evaluate it, and then sometimes it goes all the way back up to the top and starts over. But at the end, the goal, if ideal, is that you come out with this amazing thing that is helpful, and that's the end goal. But beyond that, beyond having this great product, is to be able to put it in the hands of the clients that are going to use it. You know, my grandma always said something's only worth what you're willing to sell it for. So if we can't get it from A to B, that's a problem. And so you could develop the best product in America, but being unable to get it there is very difficult at times. And so what I want to talk about today is sort of the gap, not necessarily in the design phase, but the gap between I have an idea in my brain to literally putting it in the lap of the clients to use, and the process with that. Just because I don't want to keep saying services, educational models, projects, etc., I'm going to use the word product to mean basically everything that could be in this field. So we're looking at physical products, we're looking at digital products, we're looking at educational goals, like we heard from Emma Harrington, and how they're trying to push out a matter of balance. So that is included, as well as human service products such as the home cares, the home healths, those types of models. So today I'm going to pick the topic for us. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Parkinson's, and I'm sure that you guys are all familiar. In our opinion, this is by far one of the most complex illnesses that we're seeing. We're actually seeing a huge upswing in this and diagnosis, and you'll see right now there's about 60,000 diagnosed annually, 90% which are after age 60. And so if we're talking about aging and what's truly affecting clients, this is something that we're going to see a lot of. So I think if we're looking at things, a lot of your research when you're looking at design is how does this affect a person? And we're seeing with Parkinson's, effects are going to run anywhere between 8 and 20 years, depending on, so this is a very long time when these symptoms can surface, can be managed, can resurface, can worsen. Because this is truly a progressive neurological disorder. So if we look at all of these concerns, and again, not really knowing too much about the cause, they know that it greatly affects the dopamine receptors in the brain, that there's a lot of cell death, and when the dopamine is affected, which is a neurotransmitter, the fluidity of movement really isn't there. So there's a lot of things that come from that, and as you can see, there are so many systems within one's body, I say from the toes to the nose, are truly affected with this diagnosis. So if we go back to that sort of engineering design loop, and we identify that this is where we want to put our focus, and we get a little deeper, and let's say, just for discussion purposes, we want to focus on swallowing concerns. And so we decide that that's where we want, and we start talking to neurologists, maybe occupational therapists, getting more information. We develop this prototype, and we test, and we retest, and we test, and da-da. You have in your hand the best product ever made to help with swallowing. Best one out there. So now what? I am definitely not a marketing expert. I can tell you I'm very much a social worker. I like the connections in marketing, but that's not really what I do. So I'm not here to really tell you how to take that now what and put it in the hands of somebody willing to purchase that concept or product. So that's not what we're talking about. I don't even want to talk about really how to market that product in the industry. That's not really the purpose of this talk. But what I want to really focus on is when you have that concept in your brain, and again, you come up with this amazing product, what are the barriers that this product is entering into? What is the world that these clients are in? And so that's what I really want to talk about today. So, typically in healthcare, it's not as linear as it looks, but I wanted you guys to get an idea of this is how healthcare is experienced. I want to pay particular attention to this first block. So we have a client, again, client can be patient, whatever you want to call it, but let's call it client. So you have a client and you have a support system. What we find in about 100% of the cases are these are parallel tracks. They're parallel. The thing about a caregiver is you don't become a caregiver until you give care. So often people have this role before they even know they have this role. So they're on this parallel track, and what happens is sometimes minor symptoms start affecting, and we're not necessarily talking about Parkinson's now, but just in general. So it might be everything from cold symptoms to I've got osteoporosis now, to cardiac concerns, to a variety of things, but minor symptoms start affecting their ADLs, their life. And sometimes they'll go to a doctor for those things, and again, often it's still this parallel track. So often it's still the individual themselves that is dealing with this, and then we get to sort of this bottom square. At some point, it is forced to join in most situations. And so you have this client that has been a care receiver from the system, and you have a caregiver that might have been sort of alongside them, and all of a sudden they're thrust into this situation. And so I can't tell you how many caregivers I talk to on a normal basis that say, Dad was perfectly independent. He was doing just fine at home. And then here we are with a cardiac event or something where they're now hospitalized. And so what happens then, that dynamic I think is very important, because not only is the client who was very typically independent is now maybe not as much, but then you have a support system which isn't always familial, thrust very quickly, sometimes like a brick in the face, into being a caregiver. And in this time, I'm not going to really talk about how stressful this can be and the brain chemistry that happens when we're under stress, but this is when so many things are thrown at them, is when they're sick and they're not feeling well and they're going through these huge psychological transitions. And so it's really tough for a client to all of a sudden need from a child. It's a really tough place for a child to all of a sudden need to provide care for a parent, especially those that are trapped, as they call in the sandwich generation. They're taking care of their own children. And I have right now a situation with this where I've had a client, even though she's in her 90s, she's been basically stable. She's right now in the hospital. And so the son, you know, just, we had plans for this and dinner, and boom, we're all in the hospital together on Saturday night. And so this isn't really planned for typically, it just happens. And so after that happens, then they're thrust into this variety of care providers, which we'll talk a lot about more. Wherever their home is, we'll need more management there. So it's whether you're bringing in services, whether the family's getting a little bit more involved, we have more specialists that are involved, we have home modifications happening, there's a variety of things happening. You hope that they're connected to the best of the local resources, but that's not always the case. You hope that through those resources that are appropriate services provided, but as you'll see with, as well as the engineering loop, this is another loop. So things can go and coast for a very, very long time, and then bam. And so we find that most people handle healthcare in a coast and crisis. Coast and crisis. And so that is where they find themselves in dealing with healthcare. So, if we're talking about older adults and adults with disabilities, it is very, very important to know the effects of Medicare. Medicare is by far the primary insurer for those in that group. So it's important, I'm not going to go into detail because we'll all be asleep, but Medicare primarily covers intermittent services that are skilled. So you're looking at hospitalizations, you're even looking at things like counseling in the home, durable medical equipment, which is important for you guys to know really the throes of what that means. We're looking at lab work, doctor's appointments, but things that are really touch and go services are what Medicare covers. And so a lot of people, what we find, go into this thinking Medicare covers a heck of a lot more than it does. And so you'll be like, Medicare doesn't cover that? What do you mean Medicare doesn't cover that? And so there is a lot of, I guess, over-assumption that Medicare is has much more coverage in the day-to-day than it really does. So if Medicare doesn't cover it, that doesn't mean it's not needed, okay? However, what we find is when it's needed and it's not covered by insurance, then it has to come from somewhere else. That just makes sense. So where does it come from? Normally, private pay, and that's not only the private pay of the client, but also the private pay of the family, sometimes chipped in by churches. We've got all kinds of reasons that funds become available. They also can become available, if you're not familiar, it's good to be familiar. Speaking of the VA, of the Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension Benefit, This is a special pension that can be brought in to help care and pay for health-related needs for veterans. Won't go into the specifics, but that's there. Long-term care insurance is very important and does have quite a few benefits to people. Life settlement funding, which is the cashing out of life insurance policies. We've got reverse mortgage. We've got a host of things like government funding like Medicaid. We have some diagnosis-specific funding through things like cancer care. So there's funds coming for things from a lot of places. Unless you're planning on spending all this time designing a product and then standing on the street corner and handing it out for free, which I don't think anyone is, this is very, very important to how people actually financially have access to different products. So I want to look quickly onto who's involved. Again, Parkinson's is a very complex disease process, and I'm really sorry this is so small, but hopefully I can send slides out after if you want. But I want you guys to see the web that people are surrounded by. So when you get a diagnosis of Parkinson's, this is who you're dealing with. And so people might think, oh, you'll have a neurologist and, you know, your family, maybe a surgeon. But when you really start looking at who's impacting these clients, who's providing care, you've got everything from the movement disorder specialists, which are the neurologists that are specializing, to people like myself, social workers in a variety of settings, nurses, we've got pharmacists, we've got neurosurgeons, home health, palliative and hospice, we've got home care, durable medical equipment, people like me, again, aging life care managers, we've got elevators if that's needed, dentists, home organizers, move managers, emergency room clinicians, we've got veterans-based services, we have research organizations maybe like the American Parkinson's Disease, we've got family and very, very immediate, extended, and family of choice all involved. And then also people get a lot of information from other families that have also been affected. So if so-and-so had a brother or a dad that had Parkinson's, a lot of information will get funneled in that mechanism. But what I think is so important with this is to know that these are all people that are telling people with Parkinson's what might be beneficial to them. So these are the people that are talking products. So, any questions so far? I know I'm sort of flying. Okay. So when we talk about product utilization, we have to talk about the person that's going to be using it. And so to clarify really from the client's viewpoint, what are some factors that they have to filter through to see if a product is best for them? So what they're primarily focusing on is making sure that I'm as safe as I can be and as independent as I can be. And that's a very gray, difficult balance that they find themselves in. These are things that, again, we're looking at cost, we're looking at legal issues, we're looking at brain chemistry problems, safety concerns, modifications, medical needs. But in very specific terms, I want to talk about some things that we observe in clients that are factors that can judge if a product is needed or necessary. First and foremost, we have to talk about cost, because that's very important. And cost also, of course, will hinge on insurance provision. We want to look at someone's physical and cognitive usability. Unfortunately, because of the number of comorbidities that are affecting these clients, often it's not just a client with Parkinson's. It's a client with Parkinson's, with COPD and dementia, with no family support. So you're dealing with a host of things that can affect. And so I feel like we sometimes put on blinders when we're looking at researching a project because we're focusing on Parkinson's. We're looking at swallowing for Parkinson's. But all of these other things factor in. Appropriateness of fit, and I'm talking literal appropriateness of fit. I'm also talking in concept of that, but sometimes size plays a factor. Sometimes, I mean, I had a gentleman the other day, 6'5". Height plays a factor, or my sweet little Monique, who's 4'3". You know, size is incredibly important. But you know, I had a client on our dementia unit that had to have a pediatric Mary Walker because she was so tiny. And so we have to factor in that there is this huge discrepancy sometimes in appropriateness of fit. One that cracks me up is that the family needs to identify that it's going to be helpful to them. And I call that the, oh yeah, that's for me phenomenon. That has to happen, and we forget that the family has to identify that that will be helpful. Health literacy and general literacy. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Follow up on that, because I think that's really interesting. We experience people saying more, well, that's not for me, right? So how do you get around that?
Sometimes you have to let them come into their own. Unfortunately, I think some of the best education comes in crisis. So, you know, even though I think we're pretty good at what we do, I have to turn to families all the time and say, we see that train heading for us. They are not acknowledging that this is a problem. Stay off the roads between the hours of 3 and 4 when we know they're driving. You know, I mean, there's things that you just have to say, you know, you can't help an alcoholic unless they know that they're an alcoholic. So there has to be ways that you can gently push through that denial as much as you can. I think denial is there for a really wonderful reason. It allows us to break it off in small chunks and digest it as opposed to just getting overwhelmed. A lot of this, which I didn't mention, but I think is vitally important, is there is so much loss. So much loss. And you have to think, and you know, I have a family right now, he is 67 and she's 63, brand new retirees, brand new early dementia diagnosis. Not what they're planning on. And so they're looking now at their future going, he's okay now, but they're already pulling back on how they're interacting with friends, transportation concerns, because do we want him driving? Are we at that point? She said every day I wake up and go, should he take his own meds or should I help him with that? Those are questions that are already starting. This wife, who never imagined to be in this role, is now in this role. And so there's grief and loss on hers, there's grief and loss on his, and that's, denial will set in very well with that just because it's so protective. Because it sucks. And I can't tell you how many families, that's what breaks it, is to sit down knee to knee and say, this sucks. And I'm so sorry. I'm genuinely so sorry that this is your reality. However, we really think this is going to be helpful. And sometimes it's truly just the acknowledgement of that. So many people skirt around it because they don't want to bring up the emotional part of this. But you have to think that, you know, take that split second and say, if this were my reality every day, what would I not want to have to think about? What pieces would I want to get rid of? And so denial plays just a huge part in that. So unfortunately, not all situations can be helped, but I've found that if you are willing to sit in it with them for a minute and not try to push your agenda, but try to see maybe why that resistance is there. And resistance is actually my next point, oddly enough, but yes. Okay, so resistance of use is very real. What we find is it happens for about 1,327,000 reasons, but the ones that we see a lot of would be pride and vanity, privacy. So let's say that you have COPD and you need to be on continual oxygen, and that includes the backpack. So you're in Target now with oxygen. What does that mean when you boil it down? It means that people know you're sick, when on Tuesday they might not. So now your sickness is what little kids are staring at, and people will feel sorry for you. And a man told me, I don't want to be seen as that guy, Brandy. I don't want to be that guy that people automatically see and feel sorry for. And that goes with everything from something as simple as a cane, oxygen, and so there's resistance for a lot of reasons. Also the privacy piece, and a lot of the technology that I'm seeing, unfortunately doesn't play to the fact that these people live private lives. Again, they've handled their health care for a very, very long time. And often whenever you're losing that, you grip it even tighter because you're so scared of that loss of control. So if you pair that with this now, and absolutely no offense, I'm not bashing a product at all, but if you have to log in that you've taken a medicine, and if you don't, it pings your daughter and it tells your daughter that you didn't take your med, and your daughter's on the phone going, now mama, you were supposed to take your lisinopril at 12 o'clock. Why didn't you take it? It is right there in that bottle. I made it easy as I could for you. It is in that thing and I need you to do it. Why haven't you done it? Mama's like, well, dang. I've been handling this for 42 years and now all of a sudden you're in my life and you never cared about me before. And then you go, and so, but what we find is, again, there's that, the independence is still there. The desire to handle this as much as you can on your own. And when we as a caregiver all of a sudden notice that care needs to be given, we tend to jump in with 2 feet. We're like, oh God, Mom, you obviously can't handle anything. You have dishes in the sink. I mean, it's crazy what I hear from caregivers going, but they're so confused. And we have to remind that within any deficit, there are strengths and abilities. And so where is that fine line where we really want to keep people safe and as independent as possible, but we need to factor that in. So resistance is very much there. Denial going into the fact that there's just not issues. I don't know what other people are seeing. I don't need help. Why? And that can be whole systems. It's not just the client, but those are the whole systems that have no idea. And sometimes it's because it's been such a part of their life for so long. Dad's always drank. Why is this a problem now? I mean, he's always drank 3 or 4 beers at night. I mean, now we're factoring in other things. Yes, sir.
Big comment. What I've found is that people generally want to do what they want to do, regardless. So I think the best tool is to let them do it and let them fact themselves, and then go back and show them where what they're doing may be detrimental, and let them make a decision as to whether or not they want to correct themselves. And I think if technology starts to focus on that type of methodology, we may see some better results.
I think where we falter is we just don't educate at all. And we don't get to the bottom of things because, again, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but a lot of things are just brushed over. So take small example of pain control. And I had a client that said, Brainy, I just can't get my pain under control. I was like, okay, well, and I'm looking at the prescription and it says, okay, that makes sense. It should be under control with a horse. Why is this not under control? And I look, and so I ask a very simple question that had never been asked. When do you take these? Well, I haven't been sleeping well, so I normally don't go to bed until midnight. And then honestly, once I get to sleep, I'm sleeping like a log. So I don't normally get up until like noon. So she was taking them at noon, 4, and 8. So these are pills that should be stretched out a heck of a lot longer than that. So she was going basically from midnight to noon with no coverage. So it was a major problem in her pain control, but no one had ever taken the time to say, you know, it's spaced out for a reason. This is why this is like this. She just said 3 times a day, cool, I'm up during these hours, let me space it out somewhat, and she was doing the best she knew to do. But unfortunately, in that case, she wasn't getting resolved. So what would have happened is she would have gone back to the doctor and said, my pain's not under control. What would they have done? Bumped up the dose. Typically, that's what happens, and that's part of the issue. Yes, sir?
So you get over the denial. You get over the resistance for the most part. The world isn't black and white. There really isn't just one answer to a problem.
Not at all.
So there are a plethora of factors that go into an individual's decision in what's going to be the intervention that they'll accept. Most of which isn't about their ability to function. It has to do with how it's going to be perceived on the outside, the stigma, the I'm sick, whatever, you know, the cost. So how do you get somebody to select the solution, the intervention that's going to be the best functionally and not, which is usually the least important thing to them, right? But that's the most important thing to us, particularly when it comes to technology and design.
Yes.
How do you get over that, you know, this one's going to work the best, but, or what you want is going to work the worst, but.
Yes. I think it all boils down to education, and education on multiple levels. I find that, and we'll talk, you guys are really like written my presentation for me, but in the end, the clients aren't really making a lot of these decisions. It's the families that are reinforcing that this is an important thing. And what I find is that families tend to get a better understanding of the why, and are able to see from a little bit further away why there may be resistance, and able to break through some things. And I say family loosely, people in their life. And sometimes there are better in that scenario than others to do those things. Again, our agenda is very important, but if we don't communicate that agenda well, it falls back on us, on how it's presented. So I think if we're presenting and it's failing, and we present and it fails, what is the whole insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? Look at both ends. So look at maybe how it's being presented. Is it verbal and it should be written? Is it, and there's just a million ways to say, maybe why isn't this? Is it timing? We find timing is huge. Does it have to get to the point where it's crisis before a person is able? Do they have to first try their failed issue first? And so I had a client that really needed to be on hospice, but the husband wouldn't hear it. So I said, okay, let's put him on home health. We'll let the home health company tell them that his wife isn't going to benefit from this, and then he's going to be more open to talk to me about what he should have been on in the first place. And so sometimes you have to sort of let them trip up and let them try what they think they're doing, and then try another intervention. And so I'll sort of set them up with a very concrete timeline. So I'll say, okay, we're going to try this for 2 weeks. I think your idea, I see the point that you're making, and I think that's a great idea. We're going to try that for 2 weeks. And if it doesn't work in 2 weeks, then can we try my option? Would that work?
For services, but when you've ripped somebody's bathroom apart, you put in something that isn't going to work as well, and you can't really try it for 2 weeks and then rip it out and try something else.
Well, then I think front end's got to happen. If they're not ready to absorb the change you're fighting, it's against a brick wall. There's not a lot you can do. 10, holy crud. Okay, well, let's Zoom. Y'all quit talking. No, I'm joking. So if we get to the point of really what matters most, so we have all these things that affect the client, what is the one thing that matters most? So I'm going to ask you a really fun question that I remembered in this presentation. I was like, holy crap, I forgot. What is the one factor that affects more than any other factor who you choose to marry? Answers quickly. I only got 10 minutes.
Physical.
Physical attraction. Money. Okay, what else?
Compatibility.
Compatibility. What else we got? The factors that affect who you marry. Humor. Okay. What else? What'd you say? Location. Okay. Well, guess what? Proximity. Okay. So that is the number one factor. So before anything else can be scrubbed down, I have to be in their zone. I have to be close to them. So let's say Prince Charming lives in Australia. Forget this for a minute. Prince Charming's in Australia, and he is my perfect, most compatible. It's financially wonderful. It's the cost. It's, let's go back. The complexity of him, his psychiatric concerns, his comorbidities, all these other things line up. But unless I meet him, I can't scrub any of this other stuff against if it's going to work or not. So really, you've got your client here that is going down their path, going, what the heck? And some things push them away, some things keep them in that parallel track, and some things push them towards. So the point is, how do we take that brilliant idea and get it into someone's space-time or relationship? And that is the one thing that affects, beyond any of these things that we talked about, how people get access to anything, products. So if it's education, if it's a technology, if it's a service, anything, you have to get it in their space for it to make sense. So beyond just proximity, which is access, what I call access, there's your person, here's everything in the healthcare world that's going to affect. And so I'm going to go really quickly through this list, but there's a lot that's in this healthcare arena, some on purpose and some not. It's just the reality that's going to affect how a client gets access to products. And so we're talking more about finished products in this case. So if you have that technology or that product that you've developed and it's available for market. And so you've got this host of things. So saturation of resources, I don't think that people really understand how much is out there until they're in this arena. Scott, how many home care agencies now, loosely?
1,042 in Georgia.
Awesome. Hospice, last thing I heard, is about 400. Whoops, sorry, I'm ripping off my mic. And so, and if you look at just adaptability products for things, or simple things like how many divided plates can there be, there's so much out there. And so again, you have this client that might not be in their best place to make decisions with a family/support system that has never done this before, and then it's poof, here's a ton of stuff in their face and a lot of duplicate services. So what happens is, not only is there just a volume of what's there, the unique services have a hard time to come through because of the oversight volume of the duplicates. And within the duplicates, it's hard for those that do things differently truly or can provide a specialized service or product to get through because of just the volume. So you might be one of the 1,427 and do it right, but you don't have the opportunity to get the proximity. And again, we're going back to that. Vacuum focus means if I'm a nephrologist and my client's in the hospital and is in kidney failure, guess what I'm focusing on? Okay, am I focusing on cognition? Typically not. And this happens not only in facility settings, but then also amongst all the care providers. So people go in sort of blinders, like I said, and they say, you know, what do I need to focus on with this person? Lack of communication, holy smoke, if you don't know this happens. Go one hospitalization with anybody. No one talks to anyone about anything. And not only do providers not talk, sometimes families don't talk to providers, and so there's just not a lot of give and take within that. There's also a huge assumption that someone is both unable or unwilling to pay for things outside of Medicare coverage. And so often what we find in hospital systems in particular is a lot of things aren't offered if they're privately hired, because they'll offer them things like, oh, your wheelchair is covered by Medicare, I'm going to sign the order and here it is. And when it comes to specialty technologies and products, we have no coverage for those, most of the ones that are available now. But again, people, especially social workers, are really guilty of thinking everyone's poor. And so we have to get over that hump ourselves to say, you know, even if the client has no funds, often it's family members that want to chip in and support. Home-based services, Medicare really doesn't cover many that come into someone's home setting. So a lot of the vacuum of how people are touched with healthcare is in a place that is not theirs. And so they go to a doctor's appointment, they go to a hospital, they go to an outpatient clinic. So a lot of people aren't being able to open that door and say, oh God, we have 35 cats. You know, and all the things that can happen at home, which could truly affect someone's abilities, because what you'll find is people will lie. And it's what happens, and it's often protective.
Just one quick comment on
Yeah.
the education, lack of communication piece. If you don't embrace dignity of risk and allow that individual that's going to be using the product to their ability to be a part of that decision, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is educating the adult children that they need to be there in that mindset too, because they tend to, when there's crisis, want to just overshadow their opinion on top of that person and their rights as a citizen of the U.S. to folly or make bad decisions goes out the door.
And they're scared, and so they go extreme. So it's, well, mom can't live in home, she must need to go to a nursing home. She's got to go to a nursing home. I mean, my mom had, and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We had one hospitalization. She might need 4 hours of care a day. Whoa, back it up, Sally. But because people aren't really in that environment with clients, they're not real clear often on what's going on. Because a lot of things are insurance provided, quick services are happening all the time. So if you go into a primary care physician and you're there for a cold, you might have 6 minutes. So the primary care physician, which might be your best medical hub and knowing everything going on with you, is really able to focus in on that cold. They're not able to go, oh God, well you're also having trouble with your gait. Can we look at other things? Many providers know hub. Again, who's the one person when we're talking about that huge list of providers that knows everything going on with that client? The client. And then beyond that, maybe the support system, maybe. And beyond that, there's no natural hub in this entire industry. So it's important to know that there's many, many people involved and not a real place for them to go to.
So my ignorance is I always thought that was where the social worker came from.
We sometimes get about 30 minutes. 2 minutes, I love your... And it depends. The quarterback is not naturally there. Now, it can be privately hired in certain situations and other things, but in 99% of the cases, no. I mean, and under the gun that we're often under, we have a very clear direction. Do you have transportation home? Do you need home health services? Do you have a wheelchair at home? Is your parents or your family going to come pick you up today? Welcome to social work. And ideally, we would love to do more, but that's the problem is disciplines want to do this and are able to do this. Bystander.
There's no guarantee that any of those disciplines are going to be involved, right? Because it's all haphazard. There's no, you might not be involved. So the social worker can't be the one who organizes it. The social worker's not.
Is not involved. Again, everything goes back to that proximity. Who's touching, not literally, but that person.
It's just the next one on the list.
So it's
Your turn.
I used to think that people who didn't get into the system was screwed, but if you're in the system,
It's hard, it's bad. Bystander effect, I think, is huge, and I hate that I can't remember the lady's name. Again, another social psychology term. But there was a lady in the 60s that was murdered in the lobby of an apartment building, and 30 people witnessed and no one said anything. Thank you. Thank you. So this happens all the time, and the victim is very different in healthcare. But what happens is I assumed that the doctor would say something, and the doctor assumed that I said something. And what happens is nothing gets said, or it's halfway said, or it's sort of educated or not. And so when it comes back to, again, just products and access, how much of this is going on? How much do you assume is happening and is realistically happening? So my very last slide, I promise, I've got 2 minutes. So what can be done? I've been negative Nelly, but what can we do within the system? Again, know that it's frequently not the client making these decisions to access things. It is often the people that are either professionally or personally connected with them. If you can find a way with whatever you're doing, with that person in the industry that is connected to those people that have the proximity, to make your product like a green file folder in their drawer in their mind, where they go, oh, person, Parkinson's swallowing issues, ding, green file folder, I need to tell them about this. You have to find a way to make that happen, because it has to key into my mind to go, oh, that makes sense. Let me tell them about this. And often it has to be in the front of mind. Identify early who is going to be the ones to bring products closer to the clients that are going to benefit from them. And so if it is, they're probably going to learn more from their church organizations. Are there things that are already connected in those ways that you can bring things to light? What we find is not only can they help you in the product design, because they're going to give you some really good real-life feedback, they're also going to be the boots in the ground with the big megaphone going, holy everybody, this is awesome, come use this. And so you're going to need that in the future. If this product does anything, you're going to need people in the field that are excited about it, that want to share it. Again, do not assume the healthcare system makes sense. I think we do a little too much. But that doesn't mean that we should go, oh, it's broken, and keep walking. The only reason that we've had all the improvements that we've had in the last couple of years are people saying this will not work, and it needs to be better. And so we're talking about transitions of care. We're talking about other things. I just became a care partner for one of my clients that's in the hospital. And so they're really trying, but I think we need to just try to make sense of as much of that as we can. And remember, nonprofit, for-profit, clinical, non-clinical. Lastly, if you can take, when you're designing concepts or opening up a service or whatever, and try to scrub some of the things that we've talked about today, what it's probably going to do is narrow the scope, but that's okay. I think so many products are brought to the forefront and says, this will help everyone. And if we can hone it in as much as we can to say, this is very specific, again, it's going to make that file folder make more sense for it to pop up in a certain circumstance. So I've so gone over my time. Any comments, questions, anything? I hope this has been somewhat helpful in pulling things together. Yes, sir.
One comment, and very, very great presentation, I must say. You hit some of the main points here. In terms of healthcare and how we go forward, I think technology will have to look at how, well, the technology is here. Mm-hmm. It's how we use the technology to access or to make or empower individuals to do what they need to do. Yeah. And for that reason, I feel as though if a person has an account, let's say a medical or a healthcare account, that they control, they are in control. They decide who gets access to this information at any time of the day, in real time. Just like you would use a Facebook or email, they can send out information alerts, or it can be automatic, depending on what's happening in that person's body at any point in time, if that information is allowed. So if healthcare starts to work from the patient or the individual out to the community, I believe there will probably be better access to what that person needs, that that person can access what they need in a more appropriate manner.
I think the only issue with that is that we're assuming that a person has the ability to do so. It's 1 in 2 now, over 85 with a dementia diagnosis, 1 in 8 over 65. So if we talk about aging and just the basics of dementia, a lot of that executive functioning, that ability to manage that kind of system, is one of the first things to go.
Yes.
So
The reason you would in your account. You have who is looking at you, who else knows what's going on in real time,
Yeah.
so that everyone is involved in your circle in what happens.
As long as they allow it.
Yeah, well,
And so I think that's the piece that we don't factor into a lot of this technology, is that the client, if you're giving the client the right to utilize it, then you're also giving them the right not to utilize it. And I can tell you from the clients that we work with, they have the ability to afford products like that, but I can tell you most of them would end up either in the lake or in a drawer on off, just because of the privacy factor and the fact that they've already experienced so many losses that they really, that takes not only a lot of ability cognitively, and even in the cases where that's not a problem, it's a lot to manage for them to check that I've done certain things during the day or to mark that I've done. And I think that, again, it's going to be helpful. What we need to focus on with things like that is scrub it down on all sides with all those things we talked about, specifically looking at cognitive ability and psychiatric concerns. Those are two things that none of these products are talking about. They're talking about behavior modification of clients who have dementia. I mean, we're good for some of these clients to, I mean, my poor Uncle Bill with dementia has no idea he even has a checking account. I mean, we're dealing with a much higher deficit than people are willing to talk about. And then psychiatric concerns. A lot of the clients that we're working with are coming to this with personality issues, long history of family dynamics where all the families at this link, all the family. And if you get into that zone, it's a problem. And so
it has got to be automatic, because if you're asking them to check anything,
Yeah.
they're not doing it.
and so,
There's sensors that
Oh,
can
yeah.
automatically detect what's going on, and when there's a real alert,
mhm.
let someone know, so let your account knows that, well, this is going on, and this is progressing, it's getting worse. There's need for an intervention. If technology goes along those lines,
Yes.
I think you can probably see something. I mean, we gotta try something. It's like people
Oh,
who
yeah.
smoke. They will smoke,
Mhm.
and regardless of the fact that you look, you're gonna die, your lungs die.
Oh, yeah.
So that they're gonna do it. So now, what do you do? We had a whole class last week at a MHealth conference that dealt with the issue and trying to find ways to help people to be conscious of what they're doing to themselves.
Mhm.
And these are things that I imagine you can't fix everything.
No.
But for those who want help
Mhm.
and who can make the effort, you give them the tools so that they can start that journey.
And find ways to get them access. I think that that's what it boils down to. The ones that are appropriate for those models, if we can get those models into their hands, is going to be the most important thing, because you can't use a resource you don't know exists. And that's what we're seeing more than anything. It's not that the technology doesn't exist, or maybe it's appropriate for Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones has no one telling him that it's even there. And so that's why I said proximity, just like picking a spouse, is the most important. If you don't have access or knowledge of a product, you can't use it. And if we're looking at usability, which is what we're talking about, and it's not there, you can't use it. And I know that's sort of stupid and simple, but it is what it is. And so we find that because scopes are given so broad, this is going to help everyone with everything, and instead of saying it helps this group of people and really honing in on how to best help that group of people, then I think that's going to be better understood, because again, the file drawer is going to come up and the person's going to go, holy, I need to tell so-and-so about this because it worked in this scenario. We're too broad. We're just too broad right now. Yes?
I think it's also a matter of how long the product would be able to be used.
Mhm.
You say it's only gets really cold in Atlanta, 3 days a year. Are you going to spend $300 for a snowsuit? You're not. Yes, it would be helpful those 3 days, but there's all kinds of hearing and other things that you say, well, it's $8,000, but it's only going to be used for 3 weeks. We're going to invest that for that short period of time.
Take that to the next level with your example of Parkinson's.
Mhm.
So how long is it going to be good for?
Yeah.
Right, because they're on a downward trajectory,
Mhm.
and not only that, the trajectory isn't a straight line.
Yeah.
It varies.
Oh, yes,
So
it does.
You may be able to use it today, and maybe not tomorrow. And the problem is that one of the problems is that we don't build in the flexibility in the system to be able to accommodate varying ability.
I mean,
across time.
the product ideally works in a certain fashion. It's made to help this. And when this isn't a problem or it becomes beyond that problem,
Well,
it's hard.
well, but that's where you can do that with technology. So you can make your technology flexible so that it's adjustable and variable, and that we have the technology to be able to control that by understanding how a person functions at a particular point in time. So is it pie in the sky, and are you going to put it in somebody's house? Not today.
Yeah.
But probably in 10 or 15 years, it's going to be pretty commonplace.
And does the law allow for rental or reuse? There's a very poor recycling or what do you do with the old stuff? And then maybe with hearing aids, oh, you're not allowed to resell those. It's a medical device. When in fact they can easily be programmed, but the hearing aid folks have a, you know,
There's definitely a million factors that factor in. I mean, where I don't want us to do is lose hope, to see all these problems and say, well, we can't do anything. Because with all the issues out there, there must be something we can do. I think it's just making sure that we're very mindful on how all of this can greatly affect. Again, just getting it to where it's usable. And I think that that's what the goal needs to be. If we're designing these things to help clients, it needs to help clients. And so making sure that we're doing the best we can to get to that point. So any other quick questions?
Well, one of the best locations to actually go try it before you buy is right here on this campus with Tools for Life. And I'm amazed at how many people in Atlanta and Metro and what have you have no clue that that even exists. And that they got thousands and thousands and thousands of products that you can go and see if it actually is going to benefit you before you go.
So you're saying the problem is proximity? Again, the problem is awareness. And it's the information isn't available to me. If I don't know that exists, so where's the gap? Why do people not know it exists?
Because we're in denial, we don't educate ourselves.
Well, and who are we educating or not educating?
Happened to my neighbor, not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors, but I think instead of just saying, and I see it all the time, I manage a virtual group of social workers and try to share a lot of these things that are out there, but I'm shocked. 11 years I've done this, and I can't tell you how much I learn literally every week to go, oh crap, I didn't even know that existed. And then you feel sort of dumb because you're like, how have I worked in geriatrics and had no idea that was 3 miles away from me? But it's just, unfortunately, in a lot of these disciplines, we were forced to be reactive, not proactive. So, because of the scenario or situation, we're just helping them with the walker because they need a walker, obviously. We're not showing them all the different steps to get to that point. So I think there's so much room for education. There's so much room for supporting each other, interdisciplinary support. I want to keep the conversation going. I want us to identify the issues and then get creative with them. What can we do to get through some of these barriers?
I think the biggest problem is that it's the exception and not the rule. So if this was all mainstream, this is part of life. We get old, we need this, we may need some stuff. We're gonna, our abilities change over time, whether it be when we're, 5 to 10 or 10 to 15 or 15 to 50. And but we take it as this is the exception. It's healthcare, and we only use it when we need it, as opposed to it's mainstream as part of life. And when we start getting that message out, then assistive technology and tools for life and other technologies are mainstream and not stuck in a corner somewhere in the back of Home Depot for a grab bar, or go into a durable med store that you probably don't even know where one is or never heard of it. That's going to change our attitudes and how we deal with it.
Well, and I think as generations change, and how people access information is changing.
It's got to be mainstream information. It can't be exceptional information only to be accessed, at a crisis.
Yeah. And that's unfortunately what we see most of right now. It's situational and reactive. Yep.
Our whole healthcare system is reactive, not proactive.
Truly.
If it was proactive, it would be more mainstream.
Yeah. Do what we got to do to fix it. Yes, ma'am.
So just a couple things. First of all, I will share brand new slides with everyone on the DATHA Vendor Group. So look forward to that. And also, segue into next week, we are having Carolyn Phillips and Liz Prasad
Awesome.
not AT for older adults.
Awesome.
So you're welcome to stay. I invite you to chat and network, but a big thank you to Brandy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.